I never thought owning a plow truck would become the biggest battle of my life. But when Patricia Henderson from the Pinewood Ridge Homeowners Association showed up at my door demanding I share my equipment with the neighborhood, I realized I had seriously underestimated the power of a middle-aged woman with too much time on her hands. My name is Xavier Fischer, and I have lived in Pinewood Ridge, a planned community outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for the past 8 years. I bought my house back in 2018, a decent 3-bedroom ranch on a quarter-acre lot with a 2-car garage that I converted into a workshop. The neighborhood was nice enough when I moved in: quiet streets, families with kids, and an HOA that seemed relatively hands-off. That all changed about 3 years ago when Patricia Henderson got elected as HOA president. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says the word Karen. She was 52 years old with that specific haircut where the back is shorter than the front. Always wore velour tracksuits in varying shades of pink and purple, and drove a white Lexus SUV with a live, laugh, love sticker on the back window. She took her position as HOA president more seriously than most people take their actual jobs. I ran a small landscaping and property maintenance company called Fisher's Property Services. During the spring and summer, I handled lawn care, tree trimming, and general outdoor work for commercial and residential clients throughout the Milwaukee area. But winter was where I made my real money. I owned a 2019 Ford F-350 Super Duty with a custom 8-foot snowplow attachment that I had spent nearly $15,000 upgrading with LED lights, a heavy-duty hydraulic system, and a salt spreader. That truck was my livelihood during the winter months. The trouble started in early December when Milwaukee got hit with its first major snowstorm of the season. I had been out since 3 in the morning, plowing parking lots for my commercial clients. I had contracts with 2 shopping centers, a hospital, and about 15 residential driveways that paid me premium rates to keep their properties clear. By the time I got home around 2 in the afternoon, I was exhausted, covered in road salt, and ready for a hot shower and a nap. I had just backed my truck into my driveway when I saw Patricia marching across the street from her house, her pink boots crunching through the snow that I had not yet cleared from my own property. She had that look on her face, the one that meant she was about to make something my problem. "Xavier," she called out, waving her gloved hand in the air like she was flagging down a taxi. "Xavier, I need to speak with you immediately." I sighed and climbed out of my truck. "Hey, Patricia, what can I do for you?" She stopped in front of me, hands on her hips, looking at my truck like it had personally offended her. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. The HOA has a matter of urgent importance to discuss." "I've been working since 3 a.m., I said, trying to keep my voice even. "What's going on?" "As you can see, many of our residents are struggling with snow removal," she said, gesturing dramatically at the street. "Several of our elderly residents cannot clear their driveways, and it's creating a safety hazard." The HOA board held an emergency meeting this morning, and we've decided that as a resident who owns professional snow removal equipment, you have a responsibility to assist your neighbors. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I realized she was serious. "Patricia, I run a business. I have paying clients. I can't just plow everyone's driveway for free." Her expression hardened. "This is about community, Xavier. When you purchased property in Pinewood Ridge, you agreed to uphold certain community standards. The HOA bylaws clearly state that residents must maintain their properties and contribute to the overall well-being of the neighborhood." "Right, and I maintain my property," I said. "But nowhere in those bylaws does it say I have to provide free services to my neighbors." If people need their driveways plowed, they can hire someone. They can hire me, actually. My rates are very reasonable. Patricia's face flushed red, which was quite a sight against her pink tracksuit. This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that's destroying our community. We're not asking you to plow everyone's driveway. We're asking you to plow the driveways of residents who are unable to do so themselves due to age or disability. It's the decent thing to do. Then the HOA can hire me, I said. I'll give you a group rate. $50 per driveway, and I'll handle all the elderly residents' properties after I finish my commercial contracts. Absolutely not, Patricia snapped. The HOA budget does not include funds for services that should be provided by community-minded residents. I'm giving you 24 hours to reconsider your position, Xavier. If you refuse to help your neighbors, the board will have no choice but to take action. What kind of action? I asked, feeling my own temper starting to rise. We have options, she said vaguely. The HOA has considerable authority to ensure compliance with community standards. I suggest you think very carefully about this. She turned and marched back across the street, leaving me standing in my driveway, tired, annoyed, and increasingly concerned about what Patricia meant by take action. Over the next few days, I tried to put the confrontation out of my mind and focus on work. Milwaukee was getting hammered with snow that December, which was great for business but terrible for my sleep schedule. I was pulling 16-hour days, plowing commercial lots, clearing driveways for my regular residential clients, and trying to keep up with the constant snowfall. Then the letters started arriving. The first one came 3 days after my conversation with Patricia. It was on official HOA letterhead, addressed to me at my home address, and signed by Patricia Henderson and 2 other board members, Linda Morrison and Carol Baker. Dear Mr. Fischer, it read. This letter serves as formal notice that you are in violation of Pinewood Ridge HOA bylaws, Section 7, Paragraph 3, which states that residents must not engage in commercial activities that create excessive noise, traffic, or disruption to the peaceful enjoyment of the community. Your early morning departures in your commercial vehicle, along with the noise generated by your snow plow equipment, constitute a violation of this bylaw. You are hereby ordered to cease these activities immediately or face fines of up to $500 per violation. I read the letter 3 times, convinced I must be misunderstanding something. I had been running my business from this house for 8 years. I had been plowing snow for 8 winters. Patricia had been HOA president for 3 of those years. This had never been an issue before. I called my real estate attorney, Marcus Webb, who had handled my house purchase back in 2018. I read him the letter over the phone. Can they actually do this? I asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Let me pull up your HOA bylaws. Give me 10 minutes and I'll call you back. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Okay, I've reviewed the bylaws, Marcus said. They're technically correct that there's language about commercial activities, but it's incredibly vague and was clearly intended to prevent residents from running, say, an auto repair shop out of their garage or operating a daycare without proper licensing. You're not doing anything like that. You're simply parking your work vehicle at your home, which is completely normal and legal. So they can't fine me. They can try, Marcus said. But if they do, we'll challenge it. The problem is that fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. They have dues money to fund legal battles. You'd be paying out of pocket. What's really going on here, Xavier? Why are they suddenly targeting you? I explained the situation with Patricia wanting me to plow driveways for free. Marcus let out a long sigh. That's what I was afraid of. This is retaliation, pure and simple. Look, My advice is to document everything. Save every letter, every email, every interaction. If this escalates, we'll need evidence that they're harassing you because you refuse to provide free services." I thanked Marcus and hung up, feeling a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. I had dealt with difficult clients before, but this was different. Patricia lived across the street. She had authority over my home, my property, my biggest investment, and she clearly had no intention of backing down. The next letter arrived a week later. This one informed me that my truck was in violation of the HOA's vehicle restrictions because it exceeded the weight limit for residential driveways and was classified as a commercial vehicle. I was ordered to remove it from my property within 72 hours or face daily fines of $100. I called Marcus again. He was less optimistic this time. "They're really pushing this," he said. "The vehicle restriction is real, but again, it's never been enforced. Lots of people in your neighborhood have trucks, SUVs, work vans. They're singling you out." "So what do? I need that truck for work. I can't just park it somewhere else." "You could rent a commercial parking space," Marcus suggested. "But that's going to cost you money and it's going to be incredibly inconvenient. Or we can fight it, but that means lawyer fees, possible court costs, and months of stress. There's a third option." "What's that?" "Sell the truck." I actually laughed. "Marcus, that truck is my business." "I can't sell it." "Hear me out," he said. "You sell the truck, that eliminates their current complaints. Then you either buy a different vehicle, maybe something that doesn't technically qualify as a commercial vehicle under their bylaws, or you restructure how you run your business. I know it's not ideal, but sometimes the cost of fighting isn't worth it." I told him I would think about it, but I had no intention of selling my truck because Patricia Henderson was on a power trip. That truck represented years of hard work, investment, and planning. I had built my winter business around it. I had clients depending on me, but Patricia was not done. 2 days later, I came home from a job to find a bright orange sticker plastered on my front door. It was a notice of violation stating that my property was not in compliance with HOA standards. Specifically, my lawn had not been properly maintained under the snow. There was ice on my sidewalk, and my house number was not clearly visible from the street. It was December in Wisconsin. Everyone's lawn was under 2 feet of snow. Everyone had ice on their sidewalks because it was literally freezing outside. And my house number was perfectly visible, the same brass numbers that had been there since I bought the house. I ripped the sticker off my door and marched across the street to Patricia's house. I rang the doorbell 3 times before she answered, wearing a purple velour tracksuit this time and holding a glass of white wine. "Xavier," she said, not even pretending to be surprised. "What can I do for you?" "You can stop harassing me," I said, holding up the orange sticker. "This is ridiculous, Patricia. You're making up violations because I won't plow driveways for free." "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said with fake innocence. "The HOA board conducts regular inspections of all properties in the community. If your property is not up to standard, you'll receive a notice. It's nothing personal." "It's completely personal," I shot back. "You're abusing your position as HOA president to retaliate against me. That's illegal, Patricia." Her expression turned cold. "Are you threatening me, Xavier?" "Because I can add intimidation of a board member to your growing list of violations." "I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you that what you're doing is wrong, and if you don't stop, I will take legal action." "Do what you need to do," she said. "But understand that the HOA takes its responsibilities very seriously. We will not tolerate residents who refuse to be good neighbors and who flagrantly violate community standards. You have a choice, Xavier. You can either comply with our reasonable requests, or you can face the consequences." She closed the door in my face. I stood there on her porch for a moment, breathing hard, trying to calm down. I was not an angry person by nature. I had built my business on being reliable, professional, and easy to work with. But Patricia was pushing me to a breaking point. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment continued. I received a letter stating that my garbage cans were visible from the street, violating aesthetic standards. Another letter claimed my outdoor lighting was too bright and disturbing neighbors. A third letter informed me that I was playing music too loudly, even though I had been at work when the alleged violation occurred. Every letter came with threats of fines. Every letter was signed by Patricia and at least one other board member. And every letter made it clear that this would not stop until I either gave in to Patricia's demands or moved out of Pinewood Ridge entirely. I was venting to my friend Derek Chen one night at a bar in downtown Milwaukee. Derek owned Chen Property Management, a company that handled residential and commercial properties throughout the Milwaukee area. We had known each other for years, occasionally referred clients to each other, and I trusted his judgment on business matters. "She's trying to force you out," Derek said after I finished explaining the situation. "I've seen this before with HOAs. They fixate on someone, make their life miserable, and eventually the person either complies or sells their house and leaves. It's bullying, plain and simple." "I don't want to leave," I said. "I like my house. I like the neighborhood, or at least I did before Patricia went crazy, but I also can't keep dealing with this. It's affecting my business, my sleep, my mental health." Derek was quiet for a moment, swirling his beer. "What if you didn't have the truck anymore? We've been over this. I need the truck." "No, I mean, what if you sold it?" But in a way that really made a point, I looked at him, confused. "I'm not following." Derek leaned forward, a grin spreading across his face. "You know who Patricia Henderson hates more than anyone in the world?" "Who?" "Gregory Morrison, the guy who runs Morrison Snow Services." I knew Morrison Snow Services. They were one of the bigger snow removal companies in the Milwaukee area, handled a lot of commercial contracts, and had a fleet of trucks and equipment. I had actually worked for them briefly when I first started in the business, before going out on my own. "Why does Patricia hate Gregory Morrison?" I asked. "Because Morrison Snow Services has the contract for the business park adjacent to Pinewood Ridge," Derek explained. "Patricia tried to get the contract canceled last year, claimed their trucks were too loud, too early in the morning, creating traffic problems. She went full Karen on Gregory, threatened to sue him, filed complaints with the city. It turned into this huge thing. Gregory told her where she could shove her complaints, and she's hated him ever since." An idea was forming in my mind, a terrible, petty, absolutely perfect idea. "Derek, do you think Gregory Morrison would be interested in buying a Plow truck?" Derek's grin got wider. "Oh, I think he would be very interested, especially if he knew it would piss off Patricia Henderson." The next morning, I called Morrison Snow Services and asked to speak with Gregory Morrison. His secretary put me through after I explained that I was interested in selling equipment. "Xavier Fischer," Gregory said when he picked up. His voice was gruff but friendly. "I remember you. You worked for me for what, 6 months back in 2016? "Something like that," I said. "You taught me a lot about the business. Look, I'll get straight to the point. I've got a 2019 F350 with a custom plow setup, salt spreader, LED lights, the works. I'm looking to sell, and I thought you might be interested." "I'm always interested in good equipment," Gregory said. "What's the mileage? Any mechanical issues?" 73,000 miles, runs perfect, regular maintenance, no accidents." "I'm asking $45,000 for the truck and equipment together," Gregory whistled. That's a fair price for what you're describing. Why are you selling? I heard your business was doing well. I hesitated, then decided to just tell him the truth. I'm having issues with my HOA. The president, Patricia Henderson, is making my life hell because I won't plow driveways in my neighborhood for free. She's using her position to harass me, threatening fines, claiming my truck is a nuisance. I'm selling it partly to make my life easier, but also because I know it'll drive her crazy if you end up with it. There was a pause, and then Gregory started laughing. Patricia Henderson, that woman is a nightmare. She tried to get my business shut down last year over nothing. Tell you what, Xavier, I'll give you $50,000 for the truck and equipment, cash, if you can have it ready by the end of the week. And when Patricia asks you where it went, you make sure she knows I bought it. You've got a deal, I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We arranged for Gregory to come look at the truck that afternoon. He showed up in a Morrison Snow Services truck with his mechanic, a guy named Tony who went over every inch of my F-350 with the thoroughness of a surgeon. After about an hour, Tony gave Gregory a thumbs up. "It's in great shape," Tony said. "This is top-tier equipment. He's taken care of it." Gregory shook my hand. $50,000 cash. I'll have a check for you tomorrow and we'll come pick up the truck this weekend. You need help finding a replacement vehicle. I'm going to take a break from snow removal this season, I said, a plan forming in my mind. Focus on other aspects of my business, maybe do some consulting work, but I appreciate the offer. Anytime, Gregory said. And Xavier, for what it's worth, don't let that HOA push you around. I've dealt with people like Patricia Henderson my whole career. They're bullies who think a little bit of power makes them important. Stand your ground. That Saturday morning, 2 Morrison Snow Services trucks pulled up to my house. One was a flatbed tow truck. The other was Gregory's personal vehicle. The Morrison logo was prominently displayed on both trucks, big and bold in red and white. I had my truck ready, signed over the title, and handed Gregory all the maintenance records and equipment warranties. He handed me a check for $50,000 and a business card. "If you ever want to come back to snow removal, or if you need work, call me," Gregory said. "You're a good guy, Xavier, and I respect what you're doing here." As the flatbed loaded up my F-350, I saw curtains moving in Patricia's window across the street. A moment later, her front door flew open and she came storming out, still in her bathrobe and slippers, her hair in curlers. "What is going on here?" she demanded, marching across the street. Gregory turned to face her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. Beautiful day, isn't it?" Patricia's eyes went from Gregory to the Morrison Snow Services trucks to my F-350 being loaded onto the flatbed. Her face went through several shades of red and purple. "You," she said, pointing at me. "You sold your truck to him." "I did," I said calmly. "You told me the truck was a problem, that it was violating HOA rules, so I solved the problem. Mr. Morrison made me a very generous offer and I accepted." "This is unacceptable," Patricia sputtered. "Morrison Snow Services is not welcome in this neighborhood. I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "We're on a public street," Gregory said, his voice taking on an edge. "And I'm here conducting a legitimate business transaction with a resident." "You have no authority to tell me I can't be here, Mrs. Henderson. We've been through this before, remember?" Patricia looked like she was about to explode. "I want both of your names. This is harassment. This is a coordinated effort to undermine the HOA's authority." "The only one doing any harassing is you, Patricia," I said. "You've been sending me violation notices for made-up infractions, threatening me with fines, trying to force me to provide free services. I've documented everything, and if you don't stop, I'm going to take legal action against you and the HOA board." "You're making a huge mistake," Patricia hissed. "Both of you. The HOA will hear about this." "Looking forward to it," Gregory said cheerfully. He turned to his crew. "Let's get this truck out of here, guys. We've got work to do." As the trucks pulled away with my F-350, I felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. On one hand, I had removed the source of Patricia's complaints and made $50,000 in the process. On the other hand, I had just escalated a conflict with someone who clearly had no problem abusing her authority. I did not have to wait long to see Patricia's response. Monday morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a letter from the HOA board, calling for an emergency hearing regarding my conduct unbecoming of a Pinewood Ridge resident, and my collaboration with entities hostile to the community. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center, and my attendance was mandatory. I called Marcus Webb immediately. "They're calling a hearing," I said. "They want to drag me in front of the board, and I don't know what for punishment." "What's the stated reason for the hearing?" Marcus asked. I read him the letter. Marcus was silent for a moment. "This is getting into legally questionable territory. They're essentially trying to punish you for who you sold your personal property to. That's not something an HOA can regulate." "I'll come to the hearing with you." Thursday evening arrived cold and dark, typical for December in Milwaukee. The Pinewood Ridge Community Center was a modest building at the entrance to the neighborhood, used for HOA meetings, community events, and the occasional birthday party rental. When Marcus and I arrived at 7 o'clock, the main room was set up with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of folding chairs for residents. About 40 people were scattered throughout the chairs, more than I expected. Patricia sat in the center of the board table, flanked by Linda Morrison and Carol Baker on one side, and two other board members I recognized as Frank Kowalski and Jennifer Martinez on the other. Patricia was dressed like she was going to court in a navy blue pantsuit and pearls, her hair freshly styled. "Good evening, everyone," Patricia said, calling the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We're here tonight to address a serious matter concerning one of our residents, Xavier Fischer." She looked directly at me, and I met her gaze without flinching. "Mr. Fischer has engaged in behavior that is detrimental to our community," Patricia continued. "He has refused to assist elderly neighbors with snow removal despite possessing professional equipment. He has operated a commercial business from his residence in violation of our bylaws. And most recently, he has deliberately sold his equipment to Morrison Snow Services, a company that has repeatedly harassed and disturbed our community, specifically to spite the HOA board." I started to stand up, but Marcus put a hand on my arm. "Let her finish," he whispered. "We'll get our turn." "The board has reviewed Mr. Fischer's conduct," Patricia went on, "and we believe it warrants significant consequences. We are proposing a fine of $10,000 for his various violations, along with a formal censure that will be recorded in his property records. Additionally, we are recommending that Mr. Fischer be banned from attending future community events until he demonstrates a commitment to being a positive member of Pinewood Ridge." There were murmurs from the other residents. I saw a few people shaking their heads, whether in agreement or disagreement I could not tell. Patricia looked at me. "Mr. Fischer, you have the right to address the board before we vote on these measures. Would you like to speak?" Marcus stood up. "Marcus Webb, attorney representing Mr. Fischer. Before my client says anything, I'd like to address the legal issues with these proceedings." Patricia's expression soured. "This is an HOA matter, Mr. Webb. We don't require legal representation." "Mr. Fischer has every right to have counsel present," Marcus said firmly. "And I'm glad I'm here because What you're proposing is not only a violation of your own bylaws, it's likely illegal under Wisconsin state law. You cannot fine a resident for refusing to provide free services. You cannot fine a resident for selling their personal property to a buyer of their choosing, and you certainly cannot ban a resident from community events without due process and legitimate cause. We have legitimate cause, Patricia snapped. Mr. Fischer's actions have been disruptive and hostile. What specific bylaw has he violated? Marcus asked. I've reviewed the Pinewood Ridge HOA bylaws extensively. There is no provision requiring residents to provide free snow removal services. The commercial activity clause you cited in your previous letters is vague and has never been uniformly enforced. And there is absolutely no provision regarding who a resident can or cannot sell their personal property to. Linda Morrison leaned forward. The board has the authority to interpret the bylaws and take action to protect the community. The board has limited authority granted by the bylaws and state law, Marcus countered. You don't have unlimited power to do whatever you want. What you're doing right now is retaliation against Mr. Fischer because he refused to comply with an unreasonable demand. That's not only a violation of the bylaws, it's potentially grounds for a lawsuit. The room had gone quiet. I could see several residents pulling out their phones, probably Googling what Marcus was saying to see if it was true. Patricia stood up, her face flushed. Are you threatening this board with legal action, Mr. Webb? I'm informing you that if you proceed with these proposed fines and restrictions, Mr. Fischer will have no choice but to file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, abuse of authority, and retaliation. And given the documented pattern of behavior over the past several weeks, I'm very confident we would win. Frank Kowalski, one of the other board members, cleared his throat. Patricia, maybe we should table this discussion and consult with the HOA's attorney before proceeding. We don't need an attorney, Patricia said. We have the authority to enforce community standards. Actually, I think Frank has a point, Jennifer Martinez said. She was younger than the other board members, maybe in her late 30s, and had always seemed more reasonable than Patricia. This is getting complicated. Maybe we should take a step back and make sure we're handling this correctly. I agree, Carol Baker added quietly. Patricia looked around the table, realizing she was losing control of the board. Fine. We'll postpone the vote until next month. But this matter is not resolved, Mr. Fischer. The board will be consulting with legal counsel, and we will be moving forward with appropriate action. Looking forward to it, I said, echoing Gregory Morrison's words from a few days earlier. The meeting broke up shortly after that. Several residents came up to me as we were leaving, offering support and expressing frustration with Patricia's leadership. One older woman, Mrs. Thompson, who lived 3 houses down from me, actually thanked me. Patricia tried to get me to sign a petition against you, Mrs. Thompson said. Claimed you were ruining the neighborhood. I told her that was nonsense. You've always been a good neighbor, Xavier. Don't let her push you around. As Marcus and I walked out to the parking lot, he put a hand on my shoulder. That went better than I expected. I think we rattled her. But be prepared, Xavier. Patricia Henderson doesn't strike me as someone who backs down easily. He was right. Patricia did not back down. She doubled down. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 4 more violation notices for increasingly absurd infractions. My doormat was the wrong color. My mailbox post needed repainting. My outdoor Christmas decorations were not tasteful enough. Each notice came with a threat of fines. I documented everything, took photos, and forwarded copies to Marcus. He sent a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA board, warning them that their continued harassment of his client would result in legal action. Patricia responded with a letter of her own, stating that the HOA had every right to enforce community standards and that Mr. Fisher's attorney was engaging in intimidation tactics. It was becoming clear that this was not going to resolve itself peacefully. Marcus recommended that we file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment and abuse of authority. I was reluctant at first, worried about the cost and the stress of a legal battle, but I was also reaching my breaking point. Then something happened that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in mid-January. I had just finished dinner and was watching television when I heard shouting outside. I looked out my front window and saw Patricia standing in the street, yelling at a Morrison Snow Services truck that was plowing the business park entrance adjacent to our neighborhood. I grabbed my phone and started recording, figuring this might be useful evidence at some point. Patricia was in full meltdown mode, standing in the middle of the street in her pink parka and boots, waving her arms at the truck. The driver had stopped and rolled down his window, trying to talk to her, but Patricia was having none of it. "You have no right to be here," she screamed. "This is private property. I'm calling the police." "Madam, I'm plowing a parking lot that we have a contract to plow," the driver said. I recognized him as Tony, the mechanic who had looked at my truck. "I'm not on HOA property. I'm doing my job. You're disturbing our community." Patricia shouted. "Morrison Snow Services is banned from this area. I have a restraining order." That was news to me. I seriously doubted Patricia had a restraining order against Gregory Morrison or his company, but she was clearly willing to say anything to get her way. Tony looked exasperated. "Madam, I really need you to move so I can finish my work." "I'm not moving until you leave." At that point, several other residents had come outside to see what the commotion was about. I saw Jennifer Martinez from the HOA board walking toward Patricia, trying to calm her down. "Patricia, come on," Jennifer said. "He's not doing anything wrong. Let him finish his work." "Whose side are you on?" Patricia snapped at Jennifer. "We need to stand together against these people." "These people are just doing their jobs," Jennifer said. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Over nothing." Patricia's voice had reached a pitch that probably scared dogs 3 blocks away. "This is an attack on our community. First, Xavier betrays us by selling his truck to Morrison, and now they're rubbing it in our faces by constantly being around here. They're plowing a parking lot they have a contract to plow," Jennifer said, her patience clearly wearing thin. "They were doing it long before Xavier sold them his truck. This isn't about Xavier, Patricia. This is about you being unable to control everything and everyone around you." That comment did not go over well. Patricia turned on Jennifer, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm the president of this HOA. You will show me respect." "Respect is earned," Jennifer shot back. "And you've done nothing but abuse your position for months. You're harassing Xavier. You're picking fights with local businesses. You're making all of us look like crazy people. I'm done with this, Patricia. Consider this my resignation from the board." Jennifer turned and walked away, leaving Patricia standing in the street, shaking with fury. That was when Patricia made her biggest mistake. She marched over to the Morrison Snow Services truck, reached up to the driver's side, and grabbed the keys from the ignition before Tony could stop her. Then she hurled them as far as she could into a snowbank on the side of the road. "You're not going anywhere until the police get here and arrest you for trespassing," Patricia announced triumphantly. Tony stared at her in disbelief. "Lady, you just stole my keys. That's theft." "I'm making a citizen's arrest," Patricia declared. "You're trespassing on private property." "I'm on a public road, plowing a private parking lot that I have a contract to plow," Tony said, pulling out his phone. "And I'm calling the actual police to report that you just committed theft." Patricia's triumphant expression faltered for just a second before she doubled down. You do that. When the police get here, they'll see that I was completely justified. I kept recording. This was unbelievable. Patricia had completely lost it. The police arrived about 15 minutes later, 2 officers from the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department. I recognized one of them, Deputy Sarah Harris, who had responded to a burglary in the neighborhood a year ago. She got out of her patrol car and immediately assessed the situation, her experienced eyes taking in Patricia standing defiantly in the street, Tony sitting in his truck, and the dozen or so residents standing around watching the drama unfold. "Evening, folks," Deputy Harris said. "We got a call about a theft and a possible disturbance. Who wants to tell me what's going on?" Tony and Patricia both started talking at once. Deputy Harris held up a hand, one at a time. "You first," she said, pointing at Tony. Tony explained that he was plowing a parking lot he had a contract for, that Patricia had confronted him and then stolen his keys and thrown them into a snowbank. "Is this true, madam?" Deputy Harris asked Patricia. "I was making a citizen's arrest," Patricia said. "This man and his company are repeatedly trespassing and harassing our community. I have filed multiple complaints." "You have documentation of these complaints?" Deputy Harris asked. "I've sent letters to the city, the police department, and the company itself," Patricia said. "They ignore us and continue to disturb our peaceful community." Deputy Harris looked at Tony. "Do you have documentation showing you have a right to be here?" Tony pulled out a folder from his truck. "Contract with Westfield Business Park right here. We've had this contract for 3 years. We plow their lots during snow events. We're on their property, not HOA property." Deputy Harris reviewed the contract, then looked at Patricia. "Madam, this man has a legal right to be here. He's not trespassing. What you did by taking his keys is theft. I'm going to need you to help us find those keys, and then we're going to have a conversation about whether charges need to be filed." Patricia's face went pale. "Charges? I'm the victim here. I'm protecting my community." "You took someone's property without permission and threw it away," Deputy Harris said. "That's theft, regardless of your intentions. Now, where did you throw the keys?" For a moment, I thought Patricia was going to refuse, but the reality of her situation seemed to finally sink in. She pointed to a snowbank near the edge of the business park property. "Somewhere over there," she muttered. It took 20 minutes and 3 residents with flashlights on their phones to find Tony's keys buried in the snow. By the time they were recovered, Patricia was sitting in the back of the patrol car, crying and insisting that she had done nothing wrong. Deputy Harris came over to me after she finished taking statements. "I understand you recorded some of this." "I did," I said, showing her my phone. "I started recording when I heard the shouting." "I'm going to need you to email that to me," she said, handing me a card with her email address. "It might be used as evidence." "Evidence for what?" I asked. "We're charging Mrs. Henderson with theft and disorderly conduct," Deputy Harris said. "Given that this appears to be part of an ongoing pattern of harassment, the district attorney might decide to pursue it aggressively. This isn't her first run-in with the law this year, apparently. She's racked up several complaints for similar behavior with other businesses in the area." I sent Deputy Harris the video and went back inside, my head spinning. I had wanted Patricia to stop harassing me, but I had not expected it to end with her getting arrested. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Patricia's arrest was the talk of Pinewood Ridge. I got calls and texts from multiple residents, asking if I had seen what happened, if I knew what was going to happen to the HOA, if Patricia was going to resign. I also got a call from Gregory Morrison. "I heard about what happened last night," Gregory said. "Tony told me everything. I wanted to thank you for recording that. Your video is going to help us make sure Patricia faces consequences for her actions. I just recorded what I saw, I said. I did not expect her to actually steal Tony's keys. She's been escalating for months, Gregory said. This was bound to happen eventually. People like Patricia think they are above the rules, that their position gives them the right to do whatever they want. Usually they get away with it until they push too far. That afternoon, I got another call, this time from Frank Kowalski, one of the HOA board members. Xavier, I wanted to reach out to you personally, Frank said. He sounded tired. The board is meeting tonight for an emergency session. Patricia has been suspended from her position as president pending the outcome of her legal case. We're also reviewing all of the violations and fines she issued over the past 6 months to determine if they were legitimate or if she was abusing her authority. I appreciate you letting me know, I said carefully. I also wanted to apologize, Frank continued. I've been on the board for 5 years, and I've watched Patricia become increasingly controlling and vindictive. I should have pushed back harder. I should have stood up for you and for other residents she was targeting. I'm sorry. Thank you, Frank, I said. I accept your apology. We're going to review your case specifically, Frank said. All of those violation notices, the fines, the threats. If we determine that Patricia was acting outside of her authority, which I believe she was, we'll void everything and issue you a formal apology from the board. That would be appreciated, I said. Over the next few weeks, the fallout from Patricia's arrest continued to spread. She was charged with theft and disorderly conduct, as Deputy Harris had mentioned. Her court date was set for late February. In the meantime, the HOA board was in crisis mode. Jennifer Martinez's resignation had triggered 2 other board members to step down, leaving only Frank Kowalski and Carol Baker. They held an emergency election to fill the vacant positions, and I actually considered running, but decided I wanted nothing to do with HOA politics after everything that had happened. 3 new board members were elected, all of whom ran on platforms of limiting HOA overreach and focusing on actual community needs rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. Frank was elected as the new president, and one of his first acts was to conduct a comprehensive review of Patricia's actions over the past year. What they found was damning. Patricia had issued over 200 violation notices during her tenure as president, many of them for minor or non-existent infractions. She had threatened fines totaling over $50,000, though very few had actually been collected because most residents had either complied immediately or challenged the violations. She had used HOA funds to hire a law firm to pursue cases against residents and local businesses, including an ongoing case against Gregory Morrison that the new board immediately dropped. In early February, I received a formal letter from the HOA board, signed by Frank Kowalski as president. The letter apologized for Patricia Henderson's conduct, voided all violation notices issued to me, and confirmed that no fines would be assessed. It also included a check for $500 to cover my legal fees in consulting with Marcus Webb. The Pinewood Ridge HOA is committed to being a positive force in our community, the letter concluded. We recognize that mistakes were made under previous leadership, and we are taking steps to ensure such abuses of authority do not happen again. We value you as a resident and hope you will continue to be an active and engaged member of our community. I appreciated the gesture, though $500 barely covered a fraction of what I had paid Marcus. Still, it was something. Patricia's court date arrived on February 23rd. I attended, curious to see how it would play out. Marcus came with me, partly out of professional interest and partly, I think, because he had become invested in seeing this through. The courtroom was small, a typical municipal court setup in downtown Milwaukee. Patricia arrived with her lawyer, a nervous-looking young guy in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. She was dressed conservatively, clearly trying to project an image of respectability, but the effect was ruined by the fact that she kept glaring at Tony and Gregory Morrison, who were also in the courtroom as witnesses. The prosecutor was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Linda Chen. She laid out the case efficiently, presenting the theft charge, the disorderly conduct charge, and the video I had recorded as evidence. Tony testified about what had happened, and Deputy Harris provided her account of responding to the scene. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that his client had been acting in good faith to protect her community, that she had been under stress, and that this was a first offense that should be treated with leniency. The judge, an older man named Judge Raymond Foster, was not impressed. "Mrs. Henderson, I've reviewed your record, and this is not your first complaint of this nature," Judge Foster said. "You have a history of confrontations with local businesses and residents. You have filed numerous complaints with the police, the city, and various other agencies, most of which were found to be without merit. This appears to be a pattern of behavior where you use your position in your HOA to harass and intimidate people you disagree with." "Your Honor, I was just trying to protect my community," Patricia said, her voice taking on that whiny quality I had heard so many times. "By stealing someone's property," Judge Foster said. "That's not protecting your community, Mrs. Henderson. That's committing a crime. I'm finding you guilty on both charges. For the theft charge, I'm sentencing you to 30 days in jail, suspended pending completion of 100 hours of community service. For the disorderly conduct charge, I'm fining you $500 and ordering you to attend anger management counseling. Additionally, I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting you from contacting or approaching Gregory Morrison, his employees, or his business vehicles. If you violate any of these terms, you will serve the full jail sentence. You understand?" Patricia looked like she had been slapped. 30 days in jail for trying to protect my neighborhood? For stealing property and creating a public disturbance, Judge Foster corrected. "You're fortunate I'm suspending the jail sentence. If you appear in my courtroom again for similar behavior, you will not be treated so leniently. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia mumbled. As we left the courtroom, Marcus turned to me with a satisfied expression. "That went well." And with Patricia convicted of a crime related to her conduct as HOA president, you would have a very strong case if you wanted to sue the HOA for her actions. "I don't want to sue," I said. "I just want to move on with my life." "Fair enough," Marcus said. "But if they give you any more trouble, let me know." Spring came to Milwaukee, bringing warmer weather and the end of snow season. My business shifted back to landscaping and property maintenance, and I was busier than ever. Apparently, word had gotten around about my situation with the HOA, and several people reached out specifically because they respected how I had handled it. I bought a new truck in April, a 2021 Ford F-250 that was perfect for my landscaping work, but too small for serious snow plowing. I was okay with that. Gregory Morrison had offered me a job doing contract plowing for Morrison Snow Services if I wanted to get back into it next winter, and I was seriously considering taking him up on it. It would be nice to plow snow without having to manage all the equipment and maintenance myself. Patricia Henderson moved out of Pinewood Ridge in May. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband were getting divorced, and that she was moving to Arizona to live near her sister. I felt a small twinge of something, Not quite sympathy, but maybe pity. Patricia had let her need for control and her inability to accept being told no ruin her life. She had lost her position, her reputation, her marriage, and very nearly her freedom, all because she could not stand the idea of someone not doing what she wanted. The new HOA board under Frank Kowalski's leadership was night and day different from Patricia's regime. They focused on actual community issues, organized neighborhood events, managed the common areas properly, and generally left residents alone unless there was a genuine problem. Violation notices became rare, and when they were issued, they were for legitimate concerns with reasonable timelines to address them. In June, the neighborhood held its annual summer block party. It was the first one in 2 years, Patricia having canceled them during her tenure as president because she claimed they were too disruptive and created liability issues. I went, bringing a cooler of beer and some burgers to throw on the community grill. Frank Kowalski gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the transition in leadership and expressing his hope that Pinewood Ridge could move forward as a genuine community. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who had supported me during my conflict with Patricia, came up to me during the party. "I'm glad you didn't leave the neighborhood," she said. "Patricia tried to drive out several good people over the years. It's nice to see someone who stood their ground and won." "I almost did leave," I admitted. "There were days when it seemed easier to just sell my house and move somewhere without an HOA." "I'm glad you didn't," she said. "This is a good neighborhood when it's not being run by a tyrant. We need people like you here, people who are willing to stand up to bullies." As I stood there in the warm June evening, surrounded by neighbors who were laughing and talking and actually enjoying each other's company, I realized that everything I had gone through had been worth it. I had not let Patricia Henderson push me out. I had not given in to her unreasonable demands. I had stood my ground, documented everything, and let the consequences of her own actions catch up to her. My plow truck was now part of Gregory Morrison's fleet, probably plowing parking lots and driveways all over Milwaukee. The money from the sale had let me pay off some debt and invest in better equipment for my landscaping business. And Patricia Henderson was somewhere in Arizona, hopefully learning that the world does not revolve around her and her need to control everything. I never expected that owning a plow truck would lead to a months-long battle with my HOA, a new friendship with Gregory Morrison, and ultimately the downfall of a petty tyrant who had made so many people's lives miserable. But looking back, I would not change how things played out. Sometimes standing up to bullies is expensive, stressful, and exhausting, but it is also necessary. Because if no one stands up to people like Patricia Henderson, they just keep abusing their power and making everyone around them miserable. I learned a lot from that winter. I learned about HOA law, about documentation, about when to fight and when to let things go. But mostly, I learned that sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is simply living your life, making your own decisions, and letting the bullies face the natural consequences of their own terrible choices. The block party continued into the evening, and as the sun set over Pinewood Ridge, I felt genuinely happy to be part of this community again. Not because the community had changed dramatically, but because the person who had been poisoning it was gone, and the people who remained were trying to build something better. Life is too short to let petty tyrants ruin it. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. Sometimes you have to sell your plow truck to their rival just to make a point. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, justice actually prevails and the people who abuse their power face real consequences. As I drove home that night, I passed the entrance to the business park where Tony had been plowing when Patricia had her meltdown. A Morrison Snow Services truck was parked there, probably doing some summer maintenance work. I wondered if it was my old F-350. I hoped whoever was driving it now was taking good care of it. My phone buzzed with a text from Gregory Morrison. Heard the block party was good. Glad things worked out for you, Xavier. If you want that winter contract, offer still stands. I smiled and typed back. I'll let you know by October. Thanks for everything, Gregory. Anytime, he replied. That's what happens when you stand up to bullies. Good things follow. He was right. Good things did follow. Not immediately and not easily, but eventually. The fight with Patricia Henderson had been one of the most stressful experiences of my life. But it had also shown me that I was stronger than I thought, that standing up for myself was worth the cost, and that sometimes the universe does have a way of balancing things out. I parked my truck in my driveway, the same driveway where my F-350 used to sit, where Patricia had first confronted me about plowing driveways for free, where this whole crazy situation had started. I looked across the street at Patricia's old house. A nice young couple had moved in a few weeks ago, a teacher and a nurse with a toddler. They had already repainted the front door and planted flowers in the beds. The neighborhood was healing. The community was rebuilding, and I was exactly where I belonged. Sometimes the best stories are the ones where good people refuse to be pushed around, where bullies get what is coming to them, and where a simple business transaction like selling a plow truck becomes an act of perfect poetic justice. I never thought I would miss that truck, but sometimes I did. It had been a good truck, reliable and powerful, and it had served me well for years. But selling it to Gregory Morrison had been worth it for the look on Patricia Henderson's face alone. As I settled into my living room that night, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 6 months. The harassment, the threats, the legal battles, the stress. But also the support from neighbors, the satisfaction of standing up for myself, and the knowledge that I had helped bring down someone who had been abusing their power for far too long. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus Webb. Saw the court records got finalized today. Patricia's community service hours are being done at a homeless shelter. Thought you'd appreciate the irony of her being forced to help people. I did appreciate the irony. Patricia, who had spent so much time and energy trying to force me to help people for free, was now court-ordered to help people for free. The universe did have a sense of humor, I replied. Thanks for everything, Marcus. Send me your final bill. Already sent, he wrote back. But honestly, this was one of the more satisfying cases I have worked. Not often you get to see justice served so clearly. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The weight of the conflict with Patricia was finally, truly gone. She was out of my life, out of my neighborhood, and out of her position of power. The HOA was under new, reasonable leadership. My business was thriving, and I had $50,000 in the bank from selling my truck to the one person Patricia hated most in the world. Sometimes life works out exactly the way it should. Sometimes standing your ground pays off. And sometimes selling your plow truck to your HOA president's nemesis is the perfect solution to an impossible situation. I would tell this story for years to come, I knew. The time I went to war with my HOA over a plow truck and won. The time Patricia Henderson learned that abusing your power has consequences. The time I turned what could have been a disaster into a victory by making one simple business decision. And every winter, when the snow started falling in Milwaukee, I would think about my old F-350 out there somewhere, plowing away under the Morrison Snow Services banner, a rolling reminder that sometimes the best revenge is just living your life and making choices that drive your enemies crazy. Patricia Henderson had demanded I share my plow truck. She had threatened me, harassed me, and tried to force me to comply with her unreasonable demands. And then she learned that I had sold that truck to Gregory Morrison, the one person she hated most. Her reaction had been everything I could have hoped for and more, and the consequences that followed had been entirely of her own making. Justice is not always swift, and it is not always obvious. But sometimes, if you are patient and you document everything and you stand your ground, justice prevails in the most satisfying way possible. I raised a beer in silent toast to my old truck, wherever it was. It had been more than just a vehicle. It had been the catalyst for change, the tool that brought down a tyrant, and the means by which I learned exactly how strong I could be when pushed to my limit. The summer stretched out ahead of me, full of possibility and free from the shadow of Patricia Henderson's harassment. I had work lined up for months, a good relationship with my neighbors, and the satisfaction of knowing I had fought the good fight and won. And when winter came again, I would make my decision about Gregory's offer. Maybe I would take him up on it, work for Morrison Snow Services, and get back into the snow removal business without all the headaches of managing my own equipment. Or maybe I would stay focused on landscaping and property maintenance, let winter be a slower season, and enjoy not having to wake up at 3 in the morning to plow parking lots. Either way, it would be my choice. Not Patricia Henderson's, not the HOA's. Mine. And that, more than anything else, was what this whole fight had been about. The freedom to make my own choices, to run my own business, to live my own life without interference from petty tyrants who thought a little bit of power meant they could control everyone around them. I had won that freedom, and I would never take it for granted again.